So Russia is pushing hard in eastern Ukraine, hoping that 2026 will finally be the year that they take Donetsk. But one of the units standing in their way are the Seraphims, a new drone battalion of the 104th Territorial Defense Brigade that's making Russia pay dearly for every inch. Today we're joined by Pavlo Kazarin, the senior sergeant of the Seraphims, to better understand the nature of their fight. This interview is part of a years-long campaign we're running with Car for Ukraine to help outfit the entire Seraphim battalion with a fleet of vehicles. We've made some incredible progress so far, with 9 of 35 vehicles already delivered. In fact, Pavlo talks about how the most dangerous place on the battlefield is moving to and from frontline positions, which gives you an idea just how important these vehicles are to his unit's success. So for those interested and able, the link to contribute will be in the pinned comment and description below. And with that, let's get to the conversation. All right, Pavlo, thank you so much for taking the time, sir. We've talked a lot about the Seraphims and your men over the course of the last few months, so it's an honor to be able to chat with you today.
Thanks a lot for you to invite me on your broadcast, and I want to say hello to everyone who is watching us today. My English is not very fluent, but I'll try to be clear enough.
All right, yeah. Pavlo, before we got started, and over text, was adamant that his English is not very good, and I think you guys will be surprised because his English is very good. He's downplaying it a little bit. But Pavlo, I was hoping we could get started with, would you be able to break down what exactly is a territorial defense brigade? Because we hear that term a lot. Of course, that's the Seraphims that we're helping support now. What is that? How is that different from other units?
Well, you see, it's quite easy to answer and it's quite hard to answer because before the Great War started, before the full-scale invasion started, there was a law in Ukraine due to which Ukraine army should made a territorial defense forces, and these forces is something like National Guard in United States. For example, if land forces, Navy, etc., Marine Corps, air assault forces, ground forces holding line on the front line, then territorial defense forces, they just keeping the bridges, just looking for factories, etc., help the police, and that was the idea of the territorial defense forces. And they were created on the 1st of January of 2022, and then on the end of February, the full-scale invasion started. And there were lots of volunteers all over the country. In every Ukrainian city, there were thousands of men who decided to join the army. But in fact, the only recruiter points in every region of every city were the recruiting points of the territorial defense forces. It was the nearest point to every house. And that's why territorial defense forces, they became some kind of mobilization reservoir for in every city, in every region, some kind of a buffer for mobilization reserve. For example, the quantity of volunteers was so big that, for example, the Kiev Brigade of Territorial Defense Forces in March 2022 was 20,000 people. 20,000 people, while usual brigade is approximately 5,000. So, and this happened in every city. And after that, the headquarters of the army, they looked on that situation, then they understood they don't need such quantities of volunteers to defend some factories or bridges far away from the front line. And there, in April 2022, there was a decision that we can use territorial defense forces just as we use land forces, Marine Corps, etc. Several brigades from the territorial defense forces were transferred to another forces. For example, 3 brigades from the territorial defense forces, they became the brigades of the Marine Corps. 2 brigades became the brigades of the air assault force. and several brigades they became brigades of the land forces. And that's the idea. And there is still a discussion because one of the ideas in the headquarters is let's move all territorial defense forces to land forces. And because there is no difference between the tasks that we are trying to do on the front line and, for example, the task that doing the brigades of the land forces. So that's the idea, because our experience is not very relevant to the experience of any other countries because of that collision with the huge amount of volunteers in the first 2 months of full-scale invasion.
Did I hear you correctly that the Territorial Defense Brigades were established just before the war in 2022?
Yeah, from the 1st of January,
Wow.
these type of forces appeared in the armed forces of Ukraine. It was the sixth one: land forces, navy, air assault forces, special operation forces, territorial defense forces, and air force.
Okay. Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow. Okay. But so one question or a comparison here in the United States, historically, you could sign up for a National Guard unit and you might serve with people from your town or your school or your friends. But if you joined the Army, you were just going off into the Army. Is it similar with territorial defense where you can serve alongside people from your hometown?
Yeah, the idea was just to try, the Ukrainian idea was to copy the experience of the United States National Guard. For example, in every region, there is one brigade, one
Hmm.
battalion from each district of the region, for example. If the region has 5 districts, then 5 battalions are inside the brigade. Um, but um, uh, but after that, everything um, became very different because, for example, yeah, I'm now I'm serving in the battalion which belongs to the 104 brigade of the Territorial Defense Forces, and this brigade was what was established in a region called Rivne region. But and at the beginning in 2022 and 2023, all soldiers and even officers in this brigade were from this Volyn region. But now we have new soldiers from all over the country because the first idea that it will be like National Guard, it just ruined because there was too much people in territorial defense forces and we had lack of people on the front line. So the decision was let's use territorial defense forces like any other brigade in Ukrainian army. There is no difference in the from the point of view of law Ukrainian, from the point of view of tasks, from the point of view of where we are on the front lines, etc., etc., etc.
Is that why you guys are standing up this new unmanned systems battalion? Because you're becoming just kind of one and the same as a traditional Army unit?
Yeah, the thing is that we became just as traditional army unit even in 2022. Even then, territorial brigade forces were given tanks, MRAPs, etc., etc. Yes, the first unmanned systems in Territorial Defense Brigade of the Ukrainian Army, they appeared in 2023, in the end of the 2023. For example, when I joined this brigade, there was only a company of the unmanned systems. And in the beginning of 2026, our company uh, grew to a battalion. And now we are in Donetsk region. And for example, we are standing on the front line. The brigade, which is from the left point, from the left shoulder of our position, is the brigade which belongs to Marine Corps of the Ukrainian army. And the brigade, which is from the right shoulder from us, it belongs to the land forces of the to the conventional army or the armed forces of Ukraine. So, as I said, there is no difference between us and our colleagues.
How is the communication there? Is it easy to interact with, again, a Marine Corps unit and a conventional armed forces unit, or are there challenges?
In fact, that when we are saying that the Ukrainian army is a very people army, it's not an exaggeration because, when the big war starts, your professional army the only thing it can do, it can win you some time, a year or a year and a half. In this period, you are providing mobilization. You are finding new soldiers. You are make some changes with your economy to adapt to the war, and that's why I think next to every unit, next to every brigade in the armed forces of Ukraine, it consists on 80% from the former civilians. I was a journalist before the war. My commander of the battalion, he worked as a government manager. In my battalion, there are 7 teachers, people who worked in the shops, people who repaired automobiles, people who were drivers, people who worked on, I don't know, in hospitals, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's the common thing the common situation for every brigade of the Ukrainian armed forces. Our army consists of former civilians because our professional army was fighting in 2022 and fighting in 2023 when we had lack of time just to find all these civilians, teach them how to be soldiers. So that's unfortunately it's the common situation for every big war.
Yeah, it takes a little while to get to the force you need in the middle of a fight. That's no joke. And it's interesting to see you guys going from company to battalion size. I think it shows the effectiveness, not just of the drones, but of your unit as well, to be chosen to expand like that.
The thing is, our war changed a lot. If, for example, all the previous war in the history of mankind were the wars where we threw in each other by the small pieces of metal. We threw in each one the small pieces of metal on the ballistic trajectory.
Cannons, artillery.
Yes, cannons, artillery, they all worked on the ballistic trajectory. I don't know the appropriate word in English.
Trajectory,
And
yeah, you got it.
yes, and what made unmanned system? They took every ammo and make the next to ideal system um, um, some kind of system of tracking the aim. You're not throwing the ammo on the ballistic trajectory. You are throwing the ammo just to the aim you want to hit. And that's why it changed a lot in our world, just like the First World War. During the First World War, there appeared tanks and airplanes. Just the Second World War were rockets and raiders. So just like Vietnam were helicopters, and now our war is the war of unmanned systems. And that's why, just as we are trying um, to do our unmanned systems companies bigger into the battalion into the brigades, because it's the only it's the only way to hold the front line in 2026.
So to that, there was a report that just came out about a couple senior commanders that were relieved in Ukraine, and one of the things they pointed to was soldiers not rotating off the front, and that they had been out there for much longer than
Yeah,
they
I
should have
see.
been. Can you talk about the challenges of that, of getting people to
Yeah,
and
sure.
from the front lines?
For example, in 2022, when I was on the front line, the usual situation was that we are sitting in one part of the forest, and for example, there is 500 meters of field, and in another forest there is position of the Russian army. But after unmanned systems appeared on the battlefield, everything changed because there's unmanned system. They can create a kill zone in the depth of, for example, 10 or 15 kilometers between position of the two armies. And the most difficult part of the on the battlefield is the logistics. Because, for example, when you are sitting in the hole in some blindage, you are quite protected from any ammos, etc., etc. And when you should go outside from your blindage and go 5 or 6 kilometers to the toward toward the position of your battalion, of your brigade, etc., it's quite easy to hit soldier in that moment. That's why usually soldiers are sitting on the position for that enormous period of time because, for example, they can wait for a rain or for a fog, because rain and fog it makes unmanned system useless, because you cannot just fly during the rain, during tough fog, or when the wind is blowing faster than 12 meters per second. And sometimes soldiers sitting in the trench lines, so let's say so, for a long period, not because there is lack of other soldiers, but because the logistics is very dangerous. And for example, everyone is waiting till the weather will change,
Mm-hmm.
and the window of possibilities will appear to make this rotation. And it's also is one of the it's one of the factors that unmanned systems brought on the battlefield.
That's interesting because it's no doubt nerve-wracking and beats you down being on the front and just being out there. Even if you're safe in a blindage, there's an emotional toll, I would imagine,
Sure,
being there.
sure,
But that's still that's still safer than moving back to the battalion or moving back to the brigade.
sure. And for
Wow.
example, for example, um, being an infantryman on the war is the toughest task that can only appear. And for example, we are fighting in the unmanned systems battalion, and just it's like an artillery in the previous wars. We are standing by the shoulders, by the between us and enemy. There is always an infantry, and we are working just to defend our infantry. And all we need to do is protect our infantrymen that are ahead. Which are much more closer to the enemy. And yes, infantrymen, they're they're heroes. Just it's not an exaggeration. They're real heroes of these wars.
Within your organization, the Seraphims, are you guys specializing in anything like more unmanned ground vehicles or more bombers or more reconnaissance, or do you do a little bit of everything?
No, sure, there is a specialization. For example, we have the three companies inside our battalion. The first company is the company which is providing some kind of, I don't know the appropriate word, you will correct me, разведка, which is just finding targets, which is
Reconnaissance?
reconnaissance. Yeah, sure. They are not hitting the enemies. They are just getting all the
Watching and
information on the battlefield. And they are working either with planes and so with multi-rotor. Two other companies are taking part in the battlefield. The second company is working with FPVs, which you know what I'm talking about, FPVs, yes. And the third company is working with night bombers.
Interesting.
So,
Okay.
yeah, night bombers, they became night bombers not because they're perfect at night, but because they're very loud and quite big. That's why, yes, they are former agro drones. Before the war, all these drones worked in agro holdings, and they were just putting some special things on the fields where plants were growing, etc., etc. And on the war, they are holding bombs. And our third company is working with these night bombers. And every company is providing logistics for the soldiers which are working on the front line. As I said, we are not working as far away as working infantrymen, but nevertheless, it's quite difficult to get to provide the logistics to our position as well. And sometimes the only way for us to get any ammos, food, diesel, new drones on the front line is these, and in Ukrainian we call them NRK, ground robotized complex. I don't know what's the perfect term in English. What's the
In
perfect
English,
name?
we've been using UGV, so unmanned ground
UGVs.
vehicle in English. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, as I said, the logistics on the front line is the most difficult part of, let's say, so army work, and that's why these UGVs are the only way to provide supplies to our soldiers.
Do I understand that correctly, that you then have reconnaissance, FPV, and bomber, but then everybody uses the UGVs to keep their
Yeah,
people
sure.
supplied? Okay. There's
Yeah,
not like a
sure.
dedicated UGV unit.
We have one platoon which is working in the interests of each company. So there are one platoon where only operators of the UGV, and they supply goods either to the first company, either to the second, either to the third one. But you know, I'm not quite sure. Maybe for example, 6 months, the structure of the battalion will be changed, and these platoons will appear in every company. Because, you know, it's just like tanks that appeared on the battlefield in 1915, and after that, every several months, every army changed, collected the experience of using tanks and adapted these experience to the new battlefield, just as we do now. I think that a UGV in, for example, in 2025, Ukrainian Ministry of Defense ordered approximately 5,000 UGVs to the Ukrainian army. And only in 3 months of 2026, Ministry of Defense of Ukraine ordered 25,000 UGVs to the Ukrainian army, and we still have a lack of them because we need more, much more. That's why now in our battalion we have separate platoon with the UGVs, but maybe, for example, just in several months there will be decision, let's make a separate platoon in every company of the battalion, not just in the battalion, just in general.
I think you're probably right. When you think about how traditional unit structure, there would be a supply company in a battalion or a supply brigade or a maintenance brigade in a division. It seems like only a matter of time before there's, with how important UGVs are for logistics, it seems like just a matter of time before that is, an entire company or battalion of its own.
Yeah, that's the idea. And I think that UGVs will not be the last invention of our war. Maybe there will be some new games and some new toys.
It's wild, man. It's constantly changing. But I know you're busy. Pablo, you guys are doing a lot these days. Just want to say thank you so much for everything you're doing, and thank you for taking the time to talk with us today.
Thanks for inviting. Take care of yourselves.
We'll see you soon. All right, so thank you so much to Pablo for taking the time to walk through all that today. This is a senior sergeant in a battalion at the front actively fighting a war. So a little bit busy, to say the least. And it means an awful lot that he took time out of his busy schedule to chat with us and share their experiences. I think it's really important. We see so much drone footage coming out of this war, but to get the individual soldier's perspective of what's playing out and what the day-to-day is like at the front is invaluable. Again, this is part of a years-long campaign that we're running with Car for Ukraine to help outfit Pablo's battalion with a new fleet of vehicles. So for those interested and able, that link to contribute will be in the pinned comment and description below. That's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.